Right, I think we're live. Yeah, it says so here. Excellent. Welcome, everyone. We'll kick things off. There's still a bunch of people joining, but in the interest of time, we'll just get going. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'll just make a few quick words about why we're doing this and how this webinar is going to work. Understandably, we've had a lot of inquiries since the acquisition, asking for further details on the new assets. So we had this idea that we wanted to add some color to our shareholders and our supporters and anyone else that was interested regarding, in particular, some of our geological insights on Levack that people may not already be familiar with. As you can imagine, we've been incredibly busy since the acquisition in late February with optimizing production at McCreedy West and the new development work there. But we've also been spending a lot of time looking at Levack, and as many of you know, many of us have had prior experience at Levack, and this is an asset about which we're extremely optimistic. So in terms of how this is going to work today, we've got 45 minutes that we've allocated. We'll spend about 25 minutes giving you an overview of exploration potential at Levack and why we see so much exploration upside and Dave's geological insights there. And then we'll spend about 10 to 20 minutes answering some of the questions that were pre-submitted online on the registration page. If there's time remaining at the end, we'll do our best to answer any further pertinent questions that arrive during the presentation, which you can submit in the Q&A bar on at the top here. Everyone will remain muted, but as I say, you should be able to make written comments in the chat bar, and we'll answer those if we get some time at the end. Any other questions that remain at the end that we don't have time to address, we'll do our best to get in touch and send out some of the answers on our usual social media channels. So with that, I shall hand over to Dave King, our SVP of Exploration.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. For those of you who don't know me, I think I know a lot of you on the call, but Dave King, I'm the VP Exploration here at Magna. So yeah, today it's going to be relatively freeform, relatively unscripted. But what I'm going to show you is basically I'm going to share a 3D project of the Levack and McCreedy, and just give you some, I guess, insight into our thoughts on, what our drill programs look like this year and what we're doing currently at Levack and McCreedy. More so focused on Levack. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll give it a second to fire up. Paul, can you see?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, so yeah, basically this is just a 3D data mine project of the McCreedy and Levack properties.
I'm just listening to a webinar from Magna, and then I'm meeting Sean.
Any attendees, could you turn your mic off if you have it on? Thank you. Yeah, so this is just an aerial view of the McCreedy West on the left and Levack property on the right. I just zoom in a little bit. This is the town of Levack in the center. Hopefully you can see my pointer. McCreedy West property off on the left-hand side. So that's portal access here. There's a number of surface buildings, crushing and sampling facilities, as well as sorting facilities. A little further down the road is the Levack mine. So adjacent properties, they are contiguous with one another. They actually cover about 4 kilometers of the SIC contact here. So the Levack mine, again, a number of office buildings, the main hoist room. There's a shaft at Levack, so Levack is shaft access. Really quickly, in terms of our neighbors in the area, so on the western side of us, just off of the image here would be the historical Hardy, Boundary, and Onaping deposits, owned and mined by Falconbridge historically. I guess sort of down to the south on that western side would be the old Onaping mine, including the Onaping Depths project that Falconbridge is working on. Off to our right-hand side, or the eastern part of the page, would be a number of both Vale and Glencore assets. So there's the Coleman mine directly off to the east, and then Strathcona, Falconbridge, or Strathcona and Fraser mines as well. Sort of on the southeastern part of us would be the Craig mine with the Craig infrastructure as well. So that's our general neighbors and sort of area we're in. North range of the SIC, very productive part of the SIC, or part of the Sudbury Igneous Complex. So when Jason asked me to do this, I thought, oh, that's pretty easy. But then I thought, there's a whole, I guess, spectrum of understanding of the geology in Sudbury and the deposits here. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of an overview of some of the basic geology at Sudbury here. And to do that, I'm going to cut a section through the Levack property and just give you the basics of the general geology and where the deposits sit. So a section right through here, through the Levack mine, and I'll go into vertical section view and explain a little bit of the geology and where the main, I guess, prospective areas to look for mineralization, or where you find mineralization in Sudbury. Again, that's the property boundaries are in orange there. I'm going to turn those off. And so what you see is a vertical section of the geology. I guess the main aspects that I want to point out is in the upper part, the sort of purpley colors. That's the main mass of the SIC, and this brighter purple is the sublayer norite at the base of the SIC. And this yellow color here, that's called granite breccia. So the sublayer norite and the granite breccia are the hosts to the majority of host to the nickel, copper, more massive sulfide deposits that Sudbury's typically known for. If you move into the footwall environment at Levack, at least, is this orangey colored granite or granodiorite gneisses. The greenish color represents mafic gneiss, and this I guess large package of cyan bright blue color is what's called Sudbury breccia. So that's the sort of instantaneous impact breccias that were formed during the SIC meteorite impact. Now they're important in Sudbury because that's what tends to host the footwall copper or copper PG deposits. So the vein-like or vein-style deposits that are found in the footwall of the main mass SIC are almost predominantly hosted in the Sudbury breccia packages that are in the footwall there. So that's true of both McCready and Levack as well. So along with that, I'm going to go out of section view here to sort of expand a bit on the both properties again. I'll turn off that general section so that we can see a little bit more. And if I go back into a view where I turn the clipping off, maybe turn off the surface imagery. So yeah, I was in a section right here through the Levack property, but when I expand and turn the clipping off, what I'm showing here is that sublayer norite, or the base of the SIC, is what's colored in blue here. The other important aspects here, so there's the Sudbury breccia on the McCready property, on the Levack property. Another important feature at Levack is what's known as the Facunis fault. So there's a fault structure shown in green that basically offsets the entire stratigraphy, or SIC stratigraphy at least, a couple thousand feet to the north, and then down about 700 or 800 feet as well. I guess the colored wireframes that I'm showing there in red, that's all the nickel copper contact deposits, or the main deposits that are found at the base of the SIC. And the other wireframes I'm showing, the ones in sort of this light pinkish color and the orange color, are the footwall deposits that we find at both McCready and Levack. So at McCready West, there's the contact deposits known as the main deposit and the intermain deposits. And as we move back into the footwall, there's a transitional zone into what's known as the 700 complex copper nickel PGE zone. And that further transitions as you go further out into the footwall and along the path of that system into what's known as the PM zone at McCready. So that's, I guess, sort of an end member of the deposits here, which is lower sulfide, high PG footwall style mineralization. At Levack, the current known deposits, we've got all the contact deposits. This one up here is called the main ore body. Transitions over into the number 1 and number 2 ore bodies. The down dips of some of those are called the number 7 zones. As we go down below into the footwall at Levack, a major deposit that was mined or found by FNX and then mined by both FNX and KGHM was known as the Levack or the Morrison deposit. So again, that's the high grade, high copper, high PG style mineralization. Now, I'm going to just give you an indication of the infrastructure and the historic mining here. So I'll turn off that sublayer contact just so we can see things a little bit better. Sorry. Bear with me a second. And yeah, for now, I'll leave that Facunas fault on. So there, we're just seeing the wireframes of the ore bodies or the known ore bodies on both properties right now. At McCready West, turning on the main infrastructure there. McCready West, as I mentioned earlier, it's ramp access. Most of the historic mining was in what was known as that main ore body. FNX's mining at the time defined and mined a lot of the nickel contact deposits known as the intermain. And there's also, again, that 700 complex and PM zone in the footwall. At Levack property, sorry, just wait for that to pop on. As I mentioned, Levack is shaft access. It's connected to McCready West on what's known as the 1600 level haulage drift. I might mix units a little bit today. The mines are sort of operating in imperial, so we use feet to measure the levels and whatnot. So just for scale, the lowest levels of McCready West are somewhere around the 2,000 foot vertical level. That 1600 level track drift goes over to Levack property, and the shaft, the historical number 2 shaft, which is still operating as part of the care and maintenance at Levack, has 2 main shaft stations, one at the 2650 level, one at the 3650. The other, I guess, notable infrastructure is the accesses or the levels that run down to the Levack footwall deposit or the Morrison footwall deposit, and the 2 accesses or 3 accesses coming off to the south connect up to the Craig infrastructure. So the Glencore Craig mine infrastructure. So that's basically the infrastructure and sort of what the historical mining has looked like on the property. So now I thought I'd run through some of the historical drilling, some of the drilling and exploration that we're up to. So I'm going to turn on, first I'll turn on the drill holes on the property, just give you an idea of what's been drilled on both properties. So, that's the current level of diamond drilling on McCready West on the left and Levack on the right. There's actually several million feet of diamond drilling that's taken place on both properties. And some people might say, well, geez, there's nothing left to find on these deposits. I think the way we as Magna and the way we looked at it as FNX when I worked at FNX in the past, we look at that as more of an opportunity than anything else. You could say that there's millions of feet of diamond drilling to help you understand and learn about the deposits and where you might look for additional deposits, right? So, yeah, that was just to give you an idea of where the drilling's been currently and how much drilling's been done in the past. You can see, obviously, it's focused on the known ore bodies. I'm going to turn off the drill traces and just focus us in on actually the intersections that would make ore grade and ore width. So what I'm going to show here is all intersections at both Levack and McCready that would be at least 2.5 copper equivalent grade over at least 8 feet. And they're going to be colored by this legend here. So they're going to be colored by copper grade. Sorry, one here. They're going to be colored by copper grade and by this legend here, which has, if you've got this very bright cyan blue color, you're going to be better than 3% copper. In part, the reason I want to do that is I'm going to show you, turn off some of the wireframes and core zones so we can see through them and see the actual drilling. Right, so now we can kind of see the diamond drilling. And just for a minute now, I'm going to turn off the infrastructure as well. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Paul, we're going to just jump into the questions that were answered at this moment. We'll resume with Dave, just having a computer issue at the moment.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, so who's off? Who's on? Just me? Is everyone else? Dave's off, right? Yeah, okay. Let me know when he's back on. I'll try and keep an eye on him. Sorry about that, guys. Some issues with the office Wi-Fi, I think, by the looks of it, but hopefully it won't take long. What I can do in the meantime is answer a couple of the questions that came up in the that were submitted by ahead of time. I'm not going to go into the exploration ones because Dave will address a lot of these questions as he goes along. So I'll just pick a couple of the other questions that were asked. There was one question regarding one of our new hire, Tim Bradburn, who's our general counsel, and what he's going to be responsible for. And I think I can probably guess where that question is coming from, and the inference is probably correct. Tim has been appointed as our general counsel and corporate secretary, so he's going to assist with the growing number of contracts and agreements that are both operational and related to corporate development. So that's confidentiality agreements and M&A and all the various operational contracts that come up as a producing company. And then, of course, his role as corporate secretary, that role is growing in magnitude at the company because we have all the relevant filings related to the KGHM acquisition, for example, the business acquisition report, and then all filings and documents related to becoming POP eligible at some point in the future. So we avoid the need to issue 4-month hold paper if we ever do future equity financings. And also the uplisting to the TSX. So Tim will be spending a bunch of time working on that, which I suspect is what that question was aiming at. Have a look at some other questions here. Any news on Dave yet, Kelly?
Yes, I'm on. Sorry. Can you hear me, Paul?
Oh, great. Yeah, we can hear you.
That was really bizarre in that my computer just suddenly shut down. I got a blue screen of death for a second there. I had to reboot.
Good timing. All right. Well, I'll hand it back to you. I got off one of the questions.
And I'm not quite sure where it left off, but sort of where I thought it was I had turned off all the mineralized zones at both McCready and Levack, had the infrastructure on, and I was showing the ore grade, I guess, ore width intersections in the existing drawing. And those were colored by copper grade, and the brightest colors, the brightest blue, is going to be the highest copper. And the reason I wanted to show you that, I'll turn off the infrastructure just so that we can just see where the main ore zones are, is because it I think, very clearly shows the difference at McCready here, say, with the colder colors being the nickel-rich zones, and as you move back into the footwall, getting, higher and higher grade copper as you move back into the footwall deposits at McCready West 700 PM zone. Similarly at Levack, you've got the contact zones up here with, moderate sort of 1-to-1 nickel copper ratios. But then as you move back into the footwall, there's, the Morrison deposit, which becomes very high grade copper, as well as a couple other areas increasing copper grade. Similar to McCready West, where you had the main ore body transitioning into the footwall, there's a couple of features like that at Levack as well. One of which is the main ore body up near surface here, is this big bulge back into the footwall gneisses. So it's an area where the granite breccia unit comes back into the footwall, and as it does that, it becomes increasingly copper rich. And similarly, at what's known as the number 3 ore body, you get the same sort of situation where there's mineralization moving back out into a large bulge and becoming copper and PG rich into the footwall. And of course, the Morrison deposit itself, which is a pure copper PG zone in the breccias, very much copper rich. Again, that Facunas fault is very evident here, where it's basically splitting the number, or the Levack deposits, in half. So the number 3 ore body gets faulted off and becomes on the other side the number 4 ore body, and that part of the deposit is actually on Levack, or I'm sorry, on Valley property. So that's not part of our packet, but it just demonstrates what's going on there. Yeah, so similarly, the copper increasing in the footwall.
I'm pretty sure it's good at this point. I'm just gonna head back and blow off those sticks.
His mic is on. Very similarly, you see the same sort of idea with PG grades. So again, I'm showing the highest PG grades as the sort of hottest cyan blue color. The contact nickel zones have very little PGs. As you move back into the footwall, it becomes increasingly more PG rich. And in this case, those cyan blue colors are better than an ounce per ton platinum plus palladium plus gold. Yeah, so I mean, that's the basics of the diamond drilling that exists today. Now, in terms of exploration, I'm just going to turn back on a few things here. I'm going to turn the, I guess, the ore grade intersections colored by copper again. And just as context, maybe I'll put on the infrastructure. So McCready West infrastructure and the Levack infrastructure. So currently in McCready West, basically we've got 2 diamond drills working underground, and they're really, I guess, sort of near to midterm to production support at this time. A lot of what they're doing is supporting mine design and mine planning. One of the rigs is basically drilling in and around some of the remnant mineralization near the historic mining. A second drill has been drilling off to the west of the deposit, looking to expand that 700 copper zone towards the historic Onaping and Hardy boundary deposits that are off our property there. So one's kind of on expansion drilling, a second is on sort of definition drilling, defining the remnants so that we can start to put together a mine plan to mine those. At Levack, we currently have 2 drills on surface. And the sort of, I guess, objective for those 2 drills is to, one, define and then expand on any near surface mineralization both in the footwall and in the contact that we can incorporate into our internal studies. So we're currently working on a internal study on a Levack restart plan. So anything that we can define at surface or potentially access very early in that restart program, we're trying to get it into a drill law and into a resource. And in part, it's because one of the things we're considering for Levack is, in addition to having the shaft access, putting in some access from a ramp or ramping down mineralization to allow ramp access mining as well, which could make things much easier than being captive on some of the levels based on the shaft mine. So one drill is drilling on what we know is a near surface zone of mineralization called the keel zone. You might have seen a press release a couple of weeks ago of one of our first holes. So that's a zone of high grade copper mineralization quite near surface. It's been known historically back in the footwall, hasn't been mined. I guess KGHM at the time did some drilling on it, but it may have felt that it didn't sort of meet their hurdles or their thresholds. So what we're looking to do is expand that up near surface and also towards that area that's known as the main ore body, where you get that bulge back into the footwall. And I guess that's sort of important where you get the copper moving back into the footwall from the contact deposits, as that's often the source or what looks like a connection between the footwall zones and the contact deposit. So in this case, the main ore body, we've got the keel zone nearby, very poorly drilled between the main ore body and the keel zone, and indication that there could be mineralization moving back from that main ore body. Another area we're drilling is based on some of the historic mapping in the main ore body, that again, that bulge back into the footwall. It looks like there could be veining coming off to the east from that, and also down dip. So one drill is sort of testing that theory that we've got mineralization moving down dip and east from the main ore body. A couple of the other target areas sort of in and around and expanding on known mineralization would be that we haven't started drilling yet, but we will, would be areas like the number 3, what we call the number 3 footwall zone, which, if you recall, that number 3 ore body that was getting copper rich on the east side of our property, there is indication that it's got sort of a tail of a footwall zone coming off into the footwall. Again, very high copper, high PG zones. Going to look for an example there. That intersection is, although quite narrow, just over a foot, but 22 copper and likely very high PGs in that area. 43 grams per ton PG. So looks like there's some very nice high grade mineralization moving off it to number 3 ore body. That's one drill this year as well. There's one more area that we'll likely do some drilling on that could be accessed relatively early in the mine life that hasn't been mined in the past. It's what we know as the intermediate ore body. And it's kind of a transition zone like what we see at McCready, where you're not quite contact mineralization, not quite that 1-to-1 nickel copper ratio, but starting to get higher copper and higher PG in some of those holes as well. So we'll look to expand on that and do some drilling there this year as well. Just going to look for an example intersection there. 4 feet of basically 4 copper, 4 nickel, and it likely has a fair bit of PG as well. 17 grams per ton PG. So that's kind of typical of that intermediate ore body style mineralization. Yeah, so I'm going to turn a few things off. That's basically what our current 2 diamond drills are doing. However, we are moving a 3rd rig to this property in the next couple of days here, and that's being brought on site basically to do more of a pure exploration program. So over the, we made the acquisition about a month ago. We've had access to the, all the data for just over a month. Both myself and the Magna exploration team, as well as our advisor, Gord Morrison, have really been diving into that data and looking for, I guess, areas that we want to and targets that we feel are high priority, pure exploration targets looking for that sort of next deposit on the property. So one of the things we've been looking at, as FNX mining, if I just go back early on when we were as FNX, when we first started exploring here, one of the ways we explored in the footwall was we basically knew that the footwall deposits are hosted in that Sudbury breccia, that sort of blue unit here. And basically we would drill down the Sudbury breccias and try and stay within the Sudbury breccia as long as we could and kind of use geophysics as a vectoring tool. I think one of the things we're trying to do now with some of the newer ideas that myself and Gord and the team have put together is that, that sort of worked for the first discovery here. There's been a lot of drilling since. I think we're trying to incorporate some more geologic knowledge or just, more geologic learnings into the picture. So one of the things we're looking at is you'll notice that Sudbury breccia unit is quite obvious here. So I'm just going to turn on a plane. So that's basically a flat plane that kind of represents the Sudbury breccia and the trend of the Sudbury breccias on the property. So, I'm representing a fairly thick, complicated patches of Sudbury breccia with just a plane thing. The other thing that we see at Levack that's fairly interesting, and I'm not sure how it fits on any of the other properties, but it seems to play an important role on Levack, is that that granite breccia unit that we see at the base of the SIC, periodically it has a very disrupted appearance, and it sort of disrupts the SIC contact, and you almost see these what we call granite breccia plumes up into the main mass of the SIC. And there's a number of them on the property, one of which is very much associated with the Levack footwall deposit or the Morrison deposit. There also seems to be another one or two up dip of that, one of which is associated with some sort of underexplored known mineralization kind of midway between Morrison and Keel. So that's another idea of one of the features or one of the geologic features that we're trying to incorporate into our exploration. And again, I'm just representing those. Those have sort of a linear trend to them, and obviously a depth extent down into the footwall rocks. And I'll represent some of those that we've interpreted by those yellow planes there. Now, I guess I'm just going to turn off the that Levack section per section and turn on the actual wireframe of the Morrison deposit. And so one of the learnings we've had from the Morrison and in the discovery and mining it since, as KGHN mined it out, is it does seem to have very much of a structural control in place. Especially on the east side, you get a number of veins that are running sort of striking east-west, and then they hit a almost north-south, very sharp structure that the veins tend to follow. And similarly on the west side, there's a structure off to the west side of it. So it's almost as though the Morrison deposit is bounded by two very important structures that are mineralized along them. So that's what these sort of pinkish plates represent. I'm just going to turn off that Pecunus fault for a second. And you'll see that very, well, I don't coincidentally, but that Morrison deposit seems to occur where the three of these things come together. So we've got the Sudbury breccia package represented by blue, those sort of granite breccia plume structures running more or less east-west represented by the yellow, and then these bounding structures that we see represented by those pinkish plates. So that's one of the strategies that we're incorporating, is where else on the property do those three components or those three geologic components come together? And that'll be the, form some of the basis. And there are several other spots that we've identified as sort of priority targets to have a look at. So that'll form the basis of some of the targeting that we're going to do for the first several holes. I guess one of the other things, just before we move on, I wanted to show you was we are trying to use some, basic mineralogy transitions or mineral trends to help us vector as well. One of which is, we never really have looked at, well, myself and Gord, in our experience in the basin, we never paid a lot of attention to gold and silver and some of these other elements, which is one of the things we're starting to do a little bit more at Levack and McCready as well, and see how they fit into the picture. I'm just going to turn on, I guess maybe the infrastructure, so you can sort of see where these hit. So what I'm showing here is any gold intercept that are better than 0.5 ounce per ton gold. And then colored by the legend. Hang on, I will just turn a legend on for you. Colored by this legend here, where in this case the reds are between 1 to 2 ounces per ton gold, and the cyans are better than 2 ounces per ton gold. And one of the things you notice right away, they're very much associated with the known footwall deposit or the Morrison deposit. I'm going to turn off the infrastructure for a second, and you sort of see where all that mineralization is associated with. So when you get into the peripheral or near one of the footwall deposits here, you tend to get an increase of gold, not necessarily high sulfide intersections, but an increase in the gold grades. And there's a couple other places that on the property that we sort of see that as well, that are or that we're trying to use to help vector us a little bit as well. One of which is that keel zone near surface. There's a little bit more, or there's the same idea in a couple of intersections in that number 3 footwall zone that's not well drilled either. And the other places where there's one of these granite breccia plumes kind of midway between keel zone here and the known Morrison footwall deposit, that's got a number of sort of high grade intersections that really haven't been followed up or drilled that well as either. So that's kind of another tool that we're trying to use to help vector us into some exploration target. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, that's the basics of what we're doing at Levack right now, and McCready as well. So we'll have 2 drills turning on surface or in the next few days, 2 on sort of infill and expansion drilling to I guess support our Levack restart program, and 1 drill on pure exploration drilling. In terms of some of the other properties, we've been working hard on compilation and targeting and interpretation on some of the other assets that we just acquired, including the Podolsky and Kirkwood properties, which we see a lot of potential at. Similarly, I guess for the Northex properties that we hope to close that transaction in the next several weeks, we've been compiling and working with the data we have, looking and prioritizing or trying to prioritize the various targets. I think in the current case, we've got more targets than we have personnel or diamond drill dollars. I guess the third area that we've been working on and continue to work on, during last year's program, we had a very significant budget at Green Hill. Did a lot of diamond drilling there. A lot of our drilling there was focused on following up on geophysical targets and sort of geologic exploration targets. We didn't have any, I guess, success in finding a new footwall deposit there. But we did have success sort of in a geologic sort of way, and success in testing some of our theories on we defined or very successful in defining a Sudbury breccia corridor back into the footwall at Green Hill. Also, one of the interesting things is that we did intersect with some of our drilling quartz diorites, which are very important in some of the Sudbury footwall deposits, including at our neighboring properties, the historic Vermilion deposit and the KGHM's current Victoria project. So a number of very interesting geologic features, still lots of interpretation and targeting going on. I guess it really is just a case of the Green Hill project right now is sort of secondary priority to both Levack and McCready. Paul, that's about all I had. I think I'm running out of time probably, or not too bad, I guess, but.
Thanks, Dave. No, that's great. As you can all probably imagine, Dave's little overview there was included incorporation of some of the questions that we did get submitted. So some of the questions that we had submitted have been answered by Dave, but I'm just going to paraphrase a couple here. There are some common themes, and I'll invite you to speak on this, Dave, if you don't mind. But there's a few questions that had a common theme of integrating legacy data and machine learning approaches or AI. Can we use it? Will we be using it? Are there specific advancements that we're going to utilize, and how are we utilizing legacy data in our exploration strategy? So I'll perhaps if you could speak to that briefly, Dave, just with some brief comments.
Yep. I mean, so certainly we're considering that. I mean, in terms of the new acquisition properties, it's very early in our sort of compilation and work that we've been doing. We're still, in some cases, trying to understand what's been done since, well, certainly since I was last working on these properties about 12 years ago. So kind of absorbing and trying to compile the current data. So in my mind, we need to get all the data into a format and understand what we have before we embark on some other ideas like AI or something like that. We have done a little bit of work with that and have been looking at that with our Shakespeare property, and having a bit of success there on some targets as well. So definitely considering that.
Bye. Thanks, Dave. I'll run through perhaps a couple more just in the last few minutes here. There's a couple of questions about our approach, our thresholds, if you like, or our theories on the properties that KGHM didn't follow up on, and why, particularly on Levack. So, there are a couple of points you could speak to about what we see there that perhaps they missed. I mean, I don't want to go too much into speculation about what KGHM's approach was, but if you can perhaps speak generally in terms of why we see potential at Levack that perhaps other people didn't.
I think there's some areas, I'll use, say, the Keel, for example, or even that number 3 footwall zone, the couple of known zones. I suspect, like you said, I'm not going to speculate too much on what their thought was, but their current area that they're defined, or tonnage that's been defined there, might not have met any of their internal thresholds. It's not like they've defined millions of tons of this kind of stuff. I think our approach is a little bit different in that, although it doesn't currently have large tonnage, it's got very high margin. And I think if we approach it in a little different way and try and mine it as sort of surgically as we can, we can pull out maybe not a lot of tons per day, but some very, very high margin tons out of some of those areas. So I don't know that it's necessarily that things were missed in some cases, as much as they may not have met internal thresholds. And obviously, we still have a lot of enthusiasm for the property that there could potentially be new deposits to discover here as well, especially if we can apply all our learnings from the known.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. Perhaps got time for one more. There's one of the questions submitted was related to the budget breakdown for drilling at each mine, and whether we'd raise any flow through dollars. I mean, I'll briefly comment on that and ask Dave to expand perhaps. At this stage, while we're still compiling data and still figuring out where we're going to be spending money, our budgeting only currently considers the production drilling at McCready and Levack, but that will change as we find out more and we move forward with all the newly acquired assets. Obviously, the NorthX properties, assuming the acquisition closes, would all potentially be eligible for exploration flow through dollars. So again, once that Northex acquisition is closed, we'll be putting everything into priority and assessing everything and finish all the data compilation. Also on Kirkwood, which we very much like the look of, and there's a lot of early stage work to do on that. So the answer is not particularly satisfying yet, insofar that we don't have a specific budget breakdown yet, but the work's ongoing, and we'll be speaking to that probably over the course of next couple of months, I suspect. Is there anything you'd add to that, Dave?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think, to have a defined, especially drilling meterage at this point is a little bit putting the cart before the horse. I think what we've been doing over the last month is kind of absorbing all the data, coming up with targets, and then we'll propose a budget to the board after we come up with the targets that we want to drill.
Thank you. And then the one last question. Again, this one's very difficult to answer, and we won't even try, but I'll just ask Dave to throw a couple of comments in on this. We were asked how many years of mine life are ahead of us at Levack, and what do we see as the potential revenue? Now, obviously, those questions are impossible to answer at this point without a 43-101 compliant resource estimate. Obviously, we're looking at that in some detail at the moment, but maybe Dave, if you could just speak a little bit to your experience at Levack and what the potential might be as we move forward.
Agreed. I mean, we haven't had the time or spent the time yet to actually, put together 43-101 compliant resources, but also to work on doing a reserve conversion. And that's part of, the process we're taking on right now is with our Levack restart program, is looking at the resource base, what is potentially mineable from that, and looking towards moving those into reserves at some point soon. I guess I could say that, like McCreedy West, I think Levack's got a long life ahead of it. McCreedy West is one of those mines. It's had 2 or 3 years of reserves for, I don't know how long, at least 20 years since I've known the property, and probably a lot more before that. So, that's pretty vague again, but I think we'll work towards the end of the year having more information on that kind of thing. Indeed.
Okay. Well, we promised at the outset we'd keep this to 45 minutes, so I think that sort of wraps everything up. I've incorporated a couple of the questions that were submitted during the course of this as well, so hopefully that answers most of your questions. If people have other follow-ups they'd like to do with us or submit further questions, please feel to get in touch with us through the usual channels. We'll aim to do more of these throughout the rest of the course of the year if the feedback's positive. Hope that everything was useful for everyone today, and thanks very much, Dave, for spending the time. And please feel free to get in touch if you have further questions.
Yep. Thanks all.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Bye.